The current population crisis has brought up the question in everyone's mind whether this would lead to the fall of Putin. However, what still remains unknown is, how will this lead to the fall of Putin? Why is the population decreasing? And how are they dealing with this problem? Continue watching the video till the end to know more. Hey everyone, and welcome back to yet another video from our channel. We hope you guys are doing extremely well. In this video, we will be talking about Russia's population crisis, which is about to erupt, and how this could lead to the fall of Putin. We will be diving deep into every aspect of this news, so if you are new to this channel, then make sure to hit the subscribe button. Now, without any further ado, let's hop right into the video. As Russia's war in Ukraine looks increasingly disastrous, speculation has mounted that President Vladimir Putin's misstep could prove to be his downfall. A litany of pundits and experts have predicted that frustration with the war's costs and crushing economic sanctions could lead to the collapse of his regime. But what events could actually bring down Putin? And how likely might they be in the foreseeable future? The best research on how authoritarians fall points to two possible scenarios: a military coup or a popular uprising. During the Cold War, coups were the more common way for dictators to be forced out of office. Think the toppling of Argentina's Juan Perón in 1955. But since the 1990s, there has been a shift in the way that authoritarians are removed. Coups have been on the decline while popular revolts, like the Arab Spring uprisings and color revolutions in the former Soviet Union, have been on the rise. For all the speculation about Putin losing power, neither of these eventualities seems particularly likely in Russia, even after the disastrous initial invasion of Ukraine. This is in no small part because Putin has done about as good a job preparing for them as any dictator could. Over the past 2 decades, the Russian leader and his allies have structured nearly every core element of the Russian state with an eye toward limiting threats to the regime. Putin has arrested or killed leading dissidents, instilled fear in the general public, and made the country's leadership class dependent on his goodwill for their continued prosperity. His ability to rapidly ramp up repression during the current crisis in response to anti-war protests, using tactics ranging from mass arrests at protests to shutting down opposition media to cutting off social media platforms, is a demonstration of the regime's strengths. Putin has prepared for this eventuality for a long time and has taken a lot of concerted actions to make sure he's not vulnerable, says Adam Casey, a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Michigan who studies the history of coups in Russia and the former communist bloc. Yet at the same time, scholars of authoritarianism and Russian politics are not fully ready to rule out Putin's fall. Unlikely is not impossible. The experts I spoke with generally believe the Ukraine invasion to have been a strategic blunder that raised the risks of both a coup and a revolution, even if their probability remains low in absolute terms. Ukrainians and their Western sympathizers cannot bank on Putin's downfall. But if the war proves even more disastrous for Russia's president than it already seems, history tells us there are pathways for even the most entrenched autocrats to lose their grip on power. In a recent appearance on Fox News, Senator Lindsey Graham hit upon what he saw as a solution to the Ukraine war for someone, perhaps in the Russian military, to remove Vladimir Putin by assassination or a coup. The only way this ends is for somebody in Russia to take this guy out, the senator argued. He shouldn't get his hopes up. A military revolt against Putin is more possible now than it was before the invasion of Ukraine, but the odds against it remain long. Nanhal Singh is one of the world's leading scholars of military coups. His 2017 book Seizing Power uses statistical analysis, game theory, and historical case studies to try to figure out what causes coups and what makes them likely to succeed. Singh finds that militaries are most likely to attempt coups in low-income countries, regimes that are neither fully democratic nor fully autocratic, and nations where coups have recently happened. None of these conditions apply very well to modern Russia, a firmly authoritarian middle-income country that hasn't seen a coup attempt since the early 90s. But at the same time, wars like Putin's can breed resentment and fear in the ranks, precisely the conditions under which we've seen coups in other countries. There are reasons why Putin might be increasingly concerned here, Singh says, pointing to coups in Mali in 2012 and Burkina Faso earlier this year as precedent. Indeed, a 2017 study of civil wars found that coups are more likely to happen during conflicts when governments face stronger opponents, suggesting that wartime deaths and defeat really do raise the odds of military mutinies. In Singh's view, the Ukraine conflict raises the odds of a coup in Russia for two reasons. It could weaken the military leadership's allegiance to Putin, and it could provide an unusual opportunity to plan a move against him. The motive for Russian officers to launch a coup would be fairly straightforward. The costly Ukraine campaign becomes unpopular among, and even personally threatening to, key members of the military. Leading Russian journalists and experts have warned that Putin is surrounded by a shrinking bubble of hawkish yes-men who feed his nationalist obsessions and tell him only what he wants to hear. This very small group drew up an invasion plan that assumed the Ukrainian military would put up minimal resistance, allowing Russia to rapidly seize Kyiv and install a puppet regime. This plan both underestimated Ukraine's resolve and overestimated the competence of the Russian military, leading to significant Russian casualties and a failed early push toward the Ukrainian capital. Since then, Russian forces have been bogged down in a slow and costly conflict defined by horrific bombardments of populated areas. International sanctions have been far harsher than the Kremlin expected, sending the Russian economy into a tailspin and specifically punishing its elite's ability to engage in commerce abroad. According to Farida Rustamova, a Russian reporter well-sourced in the Kremlin, high-ranking civilian officials in the Russian government are already unhappy about the war and its economic consequences. One can only imagine the sentiment among military officers, few of whom appear to have been informed of the war plans beforehand, and many of whom are now tasked with killing Ukrainians en masse. Layered on top of that is something that often can precipitate coups: personal insecurity among high-ranking generals and intelligence officers. According to Andrei Solatov, a Russia expert at the Center for European Policy Analysis think tank, Putin is punishing high-ranking officials in the FSB, the successor agency to the KGB, for the war's early failures. Soldatov's sources say that Putin has placed Sergei Beseda, the leader of the FSB's foreign intelligence branch, under house arrest. Reports like this are hard to verify, but they track with Singh's predictions that poor performance in wars generally leads autocrats to find someone to blame, and that fear of punishment could convince some among Russia's security elite that the best way to protect themselves is to get rid of Putin. I don't think Putin will assassinate them, but they may still have to live in fear and humiliation, Singh says. They'll be afraid for their own futures. The conflict also provides disgruntled officials with an opening. In authoritarian countries like Russia, generals don't always have many opportunities to speak with one another without fear of surveillance or informants. Wars change that at least somewhat. There are now lots of good reasons for generals to be in a room with key players, and even to evade surveillance by the state, since they will want to evade NATO and US surveillance, Singh explains. That said, coups are famously difficult to pull off, and the Russian security state in particular is organized around a frustrating one. Contrary to most people's expectations, successful military coups are generally pretty bloodless. Smart plotters typically don't launch if they believe there's a real chance it'll come down to a gun battle in the presidential palace. Instead, they ensure they have overwhelming support from the armed forces in the capital, or at least can convince everyone that they do, before they make their move. And on that front, Russia experts say Putin has done a bang-up job of what political scientists call coup-proofing his government. He has seeded the military with counterintelligence officers, making it hard for potential mutineers to know whom to trust. He has delegated primary responsibility for repression at home to security agencies other than the regular military, which both physically distances troops from Moscow and reduces an incentive to rebel. He has also intensified the coup coordination problem by splitting up the state security services into different groups led by trusted allies. In 2016, Putin created the Russian National Guard, also called the Rosgvardia, as an entity separate from the military. Under the command of thuggish Putin loyalist Viktor Zolotov, it performs internal security tasks like border security and counterterrorism in conjunction with Russia's intelligence services. These services are split into 4 federal branches. 3 of these, the FSB, GRU, and SVR, have their own elite special operations forces. The 4th, the Federal Protection Services, is Russia's Secret Service equivalent with a twist. It has in the range of 20,000 officers, according to a 2013 estimate. By contrast, the Secret Service has about 4,500 in a country with a population roughly 3 times Russia's. This allows the Federal Protection Services to function as a kind of Praetorian Guard that can protect Putin from assassins and coups alike. And that's all for today. Did we miss out on anything? Do you have any other insights on this news? Did you enjoy watching the video? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section down below. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. With that being said, let's meet in another one of these videos. Until then, see ya!